So when you look at that, how serious are they about even expanding the capacity? For instance, EFCC needs to be present everywhere. I don't know whether it is not duplication of duties for ICPC to exist and for EFCC to exist. There has to be a kind of cohesion. The two bodies need to work together so that the resources we have can be used judiciously. And so that's the point. You're talking about the Panama Papers. I don't even know whether the Nigerian anti-corruption agencies are paying attention at all to the disclosure. I'm not aware. Maybe they are, maybe they are not. But there are lots of hints that the Panama Papers have given. I expect in the same country, I know in Nigeria we don't care much about this corruption, but in a different country, a few people will be arraigned in court in a few weeks or so. But the FCC might be overwhelmed, the ICP might be overwhelmed to even bother about taking any step about the disclosure so far.
Okay, now let's come back to the studio. We have the Executive Secretary of the Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption with us, and Professor Bolaji Owasanwoye. He spoke about issues such as people who earn X amount and are able to pay X times 5 as rents, for instance. Are those the kinds of things that your committee is looking at?
Well, beyond that, we're looking beyond that kind of thing. I think that obviously low wages is a predisposing factor to corruption, especially if the environment is conducive for it. But we need to look beyond that. And I want to make some reaction to some of the comments made by Dr. Alabi and the editor of Premium Times. First, I think it's important that we recognize that you need everybody on board to fight corruption. It's very critical. One arm of government cannot successfully, effectively, efficiently, cost-effectively, or cost-efficiently fight corruption. So if you have just the executive pushing a crusade against corruption, it will be very slow in making impact if the others don't resonate. Second point to make very quickly, we should not paint an entire arm of government with the same brush simply because some members of that arm of government are not, if you like, sensitive to the mood of the moment. Yes, there are judges who have diminished the reputation of the judiciary, but I would not go as far as saying it is the entire judiciary. That would not be fair. The same thing with lawyers. There are lawyers who have disappointed their own profession and their own reputations, but it's not the entire legal profession. So it's important, but we need to deal with those issues. So those who diminish the reputation of the judiciary and those who diminish the reputation of the legal profession need to be confronted and dealt with. Third point, with regards to inadequacy of operatives. True, I think that when you're dealing with systemic corruption, it then appears as if you are swimming against the tide, okay? And to make it easy, you need the buy-in of the public. You need the buy-in of the other arms of government. The EFCC can only do so much, and I agree that there is a lot of pressure on anti-graft agencies like the EFCC as to whether or not there is enough statutory budgetary allocation. It's a catch-22 situation. So now you are fighting corruption and you have an economic downturn. You need to trade off. But it's critical that those agencies need to be well funded. I agree entirely. They need to be well resourced, human capital and all that. I agree with that. Fourth thing to quickly respond to, with regard to the Panama Papers, a lot of things are just unfolding. But I think it's also important to understand the context in which the information that is coming out is coming out. A lot of people don't understand that context yet. I don't know what drift your conversation is going to go. But let me say, first of all, that we're looking at people who use safe havens, okay, for certain specific purposes. The international legal regime allows safe havens. Part of the conversation should be we should diminish the damage that safe havens do, especially to weak countries like Nigeria. It's important. Third thing is that, for example, it's not an offense for a businessman to look for a place where they can incorporate a company and do business, until the mode of doing business, either they use it for fraud, money laundering, tax avoidance, then it becomes criminal. So, and when they go to such safe havens, we must look at what their companies and corporations are doing in our country and what they are doing where they've gone to. So it's a very complex thing. And the Panama Papers have not revealed all. In May, more information will come out about the corporations and a bit more details. And then it will be important at that point to begin to see how this has affected our country and the people. So far, some of those who have been mentioned have denied any involvement. My last quick comment about your question, whether or not we're looking at the effect of low wages. Abuja is a peculiar case, and it demands being looked at. When you have a civil service town where inflation in terms of cost of rent, cost of is so high, is a push factor for corruption. No doubt about it. And the government is taking a holistic view at all of these things. Just recently I read in the papers the Minister of FCT toying with the idea of legislating rent. I'm not fully persuaded that that would work. I'm not fully persuaded that it will work. But that shows you the level of concern that this is getting, that you cannot have a situation where the salaries and the wages of civil servants who work are open knowledge, but the rent, they cannot afford to live where they work. You know, it's absurd. And one of the reasons for that is that it is believed that a lot of the property around are traceable to slush funds. Okay? And so there is no economic mindset to let out those properties. That's it. And this is being looked at, really. It is being looked at.
Okay. Let me just stay with you. Now, can you tell us more about the work that your committee is doing?
Okay. This Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption is a think tank and a strategy body to guide this crusade against corruption. We focus not on individuals but on institutions strengthening. So the EFCC, ICPC, and all those people that you've talked about, the judiciary, we're engaging with them. And except anyone who wants to be uncharitable, you will see that things are actually changing. I mean, somebody did say, I think it's Mojid or Dr. Alabi, the cases that either were hanging, especially high-profile cases, they're going on day to day. We're finding a different mood whereby before, mischievous people could try to twist the system in order for cases not to proceed. We're beginning to see less of that succeeding. Okay? We've engaged with anti-corruption agencies to find out what are their basic challenges, which includes human capital, finance, technology, and we're supporting all of this. Okay? Looking at where the knots have been tied and untying it in order to improve their work. We're not an implementing agency. We find out what is going wrong and we work with government. We've designed a strategy document for government on recovery of assets, which government is using. Now, of course, like Dr. Alabi said, and I agree with that, you don't preempt your own measures by disclosing ahead of time, especially when you are dealing with a sensitive issue like corruption. But of course, the public has a right to know about some of the things that we're doing. So we're engaging with all of the institutions of government that have anything to do with corruption and engaging with them in terms of sharing ideas, what needs to be done, and we're evaluating where it's not working well. We're telling you this is not working well, you need to change your strategy. And that's why some things are changing in this crusade against corruption, and we're making some progress. I admit that the appetite of the public is very high. The appetite of the public is very high. There's a high level of impatience. But when corruption is deeply entrenched and systemic, it's not going to disappear overnight.
Can Nigeria ever be free of corruption?
There is no country that is free of corruption.
At this level?
There is no country that is free of corruption. But we have to diminish it, and we're diminishing it. That is what is important. Now, look at what is coming out in the Panama Papers. Even developed countries are being mentioned. What you need to do is to make the cost of corruption very high, which is what we're trying to do. Make sure that sanctions and enforcement work, which is what we're trying to do. Mind you, EFCC, ICPC, and all these agencies, it's not as if they are not getting convictions. They are not getting convictions of high-profile cases.
Why?
The people who steal a whole local government blind, a state blind, their ministries blind. You say why? Because then they can afford to hire a retinue of lawyers, slow down the process. Their defense is never that I'm not guilty, I didn't steal the money. It is to make sure that the cases don't conclude.
Yeah.
So we are determined now to make the cases conclude. That's the difference. They don't want the cases to reach determination. If you are innocent, it's in your interest to make sure that the case filed against you reaches conclusion on time.
Yeah.
You get a great platform to prove your innocence. But you don't prove innocence by delaying the case. You already send a message that you're guilty. So we need to separate the wheat from the chaff. So the cases that are diminishing the reputation of the criminal justice system are those high-profile cases. And they are the ones that we are focusing on. Some of the things that we have done in recent times with the anti-corruption agency and institution is to design manuals to make sure that those cases are not frustrated.